please call me back. I need help.
The most dangerous call you will ever make is not the one to 911. It is not the one to the police, or the hospital, or the lawyer who promised to help, and never did. The most dangerous call is the one where you finally tell the truth about yourself, out loud, into the dark, hoping that someone, somewhere, is listening. Nadia Vasquez made that call on a Tuesday night, at 11:47 p.m., standing alone in a rain-soaked parking lot behind the city's central emergency dispatch center, her cracked phone pressed to her lips, and her mother's gold crucifix, cold against the hollow of her throat. She thought she was calling her therapist. She was wrong. Nadia Vasquez lived her life in the space between other people's disasters. As a 911 emergency dispatch operator for the city of New York, she spent 12 hours a night with a headset clamped over her thick, dark hair, her warm brown eyes fixed on a bank of glowing monitors, her voice, calm, precise, anchored, serving as the last tether between a stranger and the edge. She was brilliant at it. In 3 years, Nadia had talked down 14 suicide attempts, guided a teenager through delivering his baby sister in a bathtub, and coordinated the response to a 5-alarm tenement fire that would have killed 40 people if she hadn't rerouted Engine 12 against protocol. Her supervisor called her the best ears in the building. Her colleagues called her the voice. She was 28 years old. She was a plus-size Latina woman, 5'5", size 16, with fair, glowing skin that caught the blue light of the dispatch monitors like polished amber. Her face was round and beautiful, high cheekbones inherited from her Ecuadorian grandmother, full lips that smiled easily for strangers and rarely for herself. A small constellation of freckles across her nose that appeared every summer and vanished every fall. Her thick, dark, wavy hair was always pulled back in a functional ponytail at work, secured with a black elastic that left a permanent dent above her left ear. She wore her deep crimson-red cardigan every shift. It was her armor, against the clinical gray of the dispatch center, against the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and emergency frequencies. The red was a declaration. It said, "I am here. I am warm. I am not a machine," around her neck, on a thin gold chain that had turned slightly green at the clasp from years of wear, hung her mother's crucifix. It sat in the hollow of her throat, rising and falling with every breath. Every word she spoke into the headset. It was the only piece of jewelry she owned. At 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, Nadia finished her shift. She pulled the headset off her ears and placed it on the console with the careful precision of a surgeon setting down a scalpel. The silence that rushed in was enormous. It always was. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind that pressed against the inside of her skull, the absence of other people's emergencies leaving nothing but the sound of her own. She gathered her things. Thermos of cold coffee she'd forgotten to drink. A dog-eared paperback. The body keeps the score, with a cracked spine and highlighted passages on every page. Her cracked phone, the screen held together by a clear case, and sheer stubbornness. "Go home, Vasquez," said Ray, the night supervisor, from across the empty floor. He was a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a voice like gravel. "You look like you haven't slept since July?" July was optimistic, Nadia said, shouldering her bag. She walked out of the building, into the rain. The parking lot behind the dispatch center was a rectangle of cracked asphalt bordered by a chain-link fence and a row of dying elms. Nadia's car, a dented 12-year-old Honda Civic with 187,000 miles, a passenger window that didn't roll up all the way, and a check engine light that had been on so long she'd named it Gerald, sat in the far corner under a broken streetlight. She unlocked it. She sat in the driver's seat. She didn't start the engine. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. The cracked screen distorted the text, but she could read it. "I saw you walking to your car yesterday. You looked tired, Nadie. You should come home, Derek." Nadia's stomach clenched, not with fear. Fear would have been cleaner, sharper, easier to name. This was something older and heavier. This was the slow, grinding dread of a woman who had been told for 4 years that she was loved and had finally understood that what she was being described wasn't love. It was inventory. Derek Calloway had never loved Nadia. He had catalogued her. He was her ex-husband. They had been divorced for 11 months. She had a restraining order. He had ignored it 14 times. She had reported it 8 times. The police had done precisely nothing, because Derek didn't look like a monster. Derek looked like a regional sales manager in khakis and a button-down shirt. He had sandy brown hair and blue eyes and a smile that made HR representatives feel safe. But Nadia knew better. She was a woman who listened to voices for a living, and she had learned to hear the frequency beneath the words. Derek's frequency was control. Low, constant, humming like a refrigerator you don't notice until it stops. You should come home. She deleted the text. Her hands were shaking. She needed to talk to Dr. Evans. Her therapist had given her a specific instruction for nights like this. When the panic starts, leave me a voice note. Don't think about it. Just talk. Say whatever comes. I'll listen in the morning. Nadia opened her phone. Her vision blurred. Exhaustion and the sharp sting of tears she'd been holding for 16 hours. The crack across the screen distorted the contact list. She tapped what she thought was Dr. Evans. She hit the microphone icon. She started talking. "I'm drowning," she said, and her voice cracked immediately, splitting open like ice on a warming lake. "I'm so tired. I worked a double at dispatch and then 4 hours at the diner. And my mother's oxygen concentrator is making that sound again, and the repair company wants $800. And I don't have $800. I have $47 and a check engine light." She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a woman who had been carrying a building on her shoulders and had just felt the first crack in her spine. And Derek. He won't stop. He was outside my building again. I could see his car from my window. He just sits there with the engine running, watching my lights. The police told me to document everything. I have a binder, Dr. Evans, a binder full of documentation. Nobody reads it. She pressed her forehead against the cold steering wheel. The gold crucifix swung forward, tapping the dashboard. "I want to disappear," she whispered. I don't mean that. I don't want to die. I just want 5 minutes where nobody needs me. 5 minutes where I'm not holding someone's life together on a phone line, or propping up my mother's body, or running from a man who thinks my fear is a love letter. I just want someone to listen, and not give me a homework assignment about breathing exercises. She released the button. The voice note flew into the digital void. She tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, rested her forehead on her arms, and breathed. She expected the automated out-of-office response Dr. Evans set after 10 p.m. The reply came in 30 seconds. It was not automated. "Wrong number, but I have time now." Nadia stared at the screen. The crack on the glass distorted the words, but they were unmistakable. She hadn't called Dr. Evans. She had poured her entire fractured life into a stranger's phone. Her first instinct was horror. Her second was the nauseating vertigo of someone who has accidentally been naked in public. Her third instinct, the one that won, was something else entirely. Something reckless. Something that felt, for the first time in months, like oxygen. She typed back. "I am so sorry. Please delete that." The reply came in 4 seconds. "No, then..." A pause. 3 dots. Typing. "You said you wanted someone to listen without giving you a homework assignment. I don't give homework. I don't give advice. I listen. If you want to keep talking, I have time. Across the city, in a soundproofed office on the top floor of a building that appeared on no public records." Luca Ferraro set his phone down on his mahogany desk and looked at it as though it had just spoken to him in a language he'd forgotten he knew. Luca was not a therapist. Luca Ferraro was the don of the Ferraro Syndicate, a man who controlled 17% of the shipping that moved through New York Harbor, who owned judges the way other men owned neckties, and whose name was spoken in certain circles the way medieval villagers spoke of plagues. He was 36 years old, 6'2", built like a Roman column, massive shoulders, a powerful V-shaped torso, arms that strained the rolled sleeves of his white dress shirt. He had dark hair swept back with a slight wave, a strong jaw covered in perpetual stubble, and intense dark brown eyes flecked with gold that had made grown men confess to things they hadn't done. He had a small scar through his left eyebrow, a reminder from the night his father was killed when Luca was 19, a night that had ended with Luca inheriting an empire he hadn't asked for, and a capacity for violence he hadn't known he possessed. He was, at this precise moment, in the middle of an interrogation. A man named Carlo was zip-tied to a chair in the adjacent room, bleeding from a split lip, swearing on his mother's grave that he hadn't skimmed the port receipts. Elena Vitali. Luca's consigliere, a 42-year-old woman with silver-streaked dark hair, reading glasses on a chain, and the sharpest mind in organized crime, was leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed, waiting for Luca's decision. Then the voice note arrived. "I'm drowning." Luca had held up his hand. The room froze. He played the message on the phone speaker. A woman's voice filled the soundproofed room, raw, exhausted, honest in a way that felt physically dangerous, like an exposed nerve. "I want to disappear." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Wrong number?" "One digit off from Dr. Patricia Evans," Luca said, his voice flat. "Upper East Side psychologist, common referral for domestic abuse survivors. How do you know that?" Luca didn't answer. He knew because the Ferraro syndicate maintained comprehensive intelligence on every phone number within 3 digits of his personal devices. It was standard operational security. But that wasn't why he responded. He responded because the woman's voice, broken, angry, real, was the most honest thing he had heard in 7 years. In Luca's world, everyone lied. Everyone performed. Everyone calculated the angle. This woman had simply bled. He texted back. "Wrong number, but I have time now." Elena watched him. "You're engaging with a civilian." "I'm listening to one," Luca corrected. "It's a novel experience. Nadia just accidentally poured her soul into the phone of the most dangerous man in New York. If you're riding with the plus-size dispatcher who saves lives all day but can't save her own, hit subscribe and drop the wrong text, or I have time in the comments. This story is about to break you." She kept talking. Not that night. That night, she drove home in stunned silence, checked on her mother, sleeping, the oxygen concentrator wheezing like an old accordion, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the mortification of having voice noted her entire emotional breakdown to a stranger. But the next morning, she texted again. "I really am sorry about last night. Please forget everything I said." The reply came in 12 seconds. "I told you, I don't give advice. But I don't forget either. How's the oxygen concentrator?" Nadia stared at the message. A stranger, a wrong number, had remembered a single detail from her rambling midnight confession and asked about it. Nobody asked about the oxygen concentrator. Not her friends. Not her co-workers. Not the medical supply company that sent cheerful automated payment reminders. She typed, still making the sound. "I'm calling the repair company today. How much?" $800. A pause. 3 dots. Then, "Don't call them. I'll send someone." Nadia typed rapidly. "Absolutely not. I don't know who you are. I don't take things from strangers. You talked to me for 4 minutes about wanting to disappear. That's not stranger behavior, Nadia. That's trust." She froze. He knew her name. Of course he did. She'd said it in the voice note. "Derek won't stop texting Nadie. I'm not a threat," he typed. "I'm the wrong number." "That's all I am right now." The conversation continued. Over the next 3 days in fragments. Texts sent between dispatch calls for Nadia. Texts sent between things she did not want to know about for the stranger. They built something that had no name. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't romance. It was closer to a frequency. 2 people tuning into the same wavelength from opposite ends of a broken city. She told him about her mother, Rosa, 61. Former seamstress. Hands that had made 300 wedding dresses, now unable to hold a coffee cup. Hands that used to pin silk so precisely that brides wept at their first fitting. Hands that now trembled so violently that Nadia cut her food for her every morning. She told him about the 3 jobs, dispatch from 4 p.m. to midnight, the diner from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., and weekend cleaning shifts at the university, scrubbing lecture halls at dawn while her knees ached and her back screamed. She told him about the exhaustion that lived inside her bones like cement, not the tiredness you fix with sleep, but the kind that settles into your marrow and becomes part of your architecture. He told her very little. He said his name was Luca. He said he worked in logistics. He said he understood what it meant to carry something heavier than your own body. He said he didn't sleep well either. She caught fragments of his world through the edges of his texts at 2:14 a.m. Still awake? At 3:07 a.m. The city looks different at this hour, quieter, honest at 4:30 a.m. My father used to say that the only truth you hear is the one spoken after midnight. I think he was right. She texted back. I think that's why I called you. After midnight. By accident. Nothing is by accident, Nadia. She learned to read his texts the way she read voices on the dispatch line. Not the words, but the frequency beneath them. When he wrote short, clipped responses, he was working. When he wrote longer messages, rare, careful, each word chosen with the precision of a man placing pieces on a chessboard, he was alone. When he sent messages at 4 a.m., he was standing at a window, watching the city he owned, wondering if owning things was the same as belonging to them. She began to look forward to the alone messages. She began to feel a small, dangerous warmth in her chest when her phone buzzed during her dispatch shift, a warmth she immediately suppressed, because Nadia Vasquez did not have room in her life for warmth. She had room for coffee, and schedules, and emergency frequencies. On the fourth day, the oxygen concentrator was repaired. Nadia came home from her diner shift to find her mother's machine running silently. A new filter installed, the old parts replaced. There was no bill, no invoice, no business card. On the counter sat a small white box containing a single cannoli from the best bakery in Little Italy. Her mother was eating it when Nadia walked in, chocolate on her chin, laughing. A nice man came, Rosa said, her voice whispery from the oxygen. Very tall, very polite. He fixed everything. Nadia's blood went cold, then hot. Then something she couldn't name. She texted the wrong number. You sent someone to my mother's apartment. The concentrator needed a new compressor. The repair company would have overcharged you by $340. That's not the point. What's the point? I don't take charity. A long pause, then. It wasn't charity, Nadia. It was maintenance. You maintain other people's emergencies 12 hours a night. Somebody should maintain yours. She stared at the message for a very long time. She read it 3 times. She pressed her mother's crucifix against her lips and breathed. Then she typed, "Who are you? I told you." The wrong number. No. Who are you really? The pause stretched. 20 seconds. 30. A minute. Come to 412 West 49th Street tomorrow at noon. I'll show you. She almost didn't go. She changed her outfit 3 times, which was absurd. She was not a woman who changed outfits. She was a woman who owned 4 pairs of scrubs, 2 sweaters, 1 good dress she hadn't worn since her grandmother's funeral, and 11 variations of the same crimson cardigan. She settled on her newest cardigan, the darkest red, the one with buttons that still held, over her cleanest black scrubs. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She saw the dark circles. She saw the soft fullness of her face, the width of her hips, the way her body filled space in a way that Derek had called too much, and that she had spent years trying to make smaller. She pressed her mother's crucifix against her collarbone and reminded herself of something Rosa had told her when Nadia was 14 and crying about a dress that didn't fit. The dress is wrong, Mija, not the body. She stood on the sidewalk across the street from 412 West 49th Street for 11 minutes, her crimson cardigan pulled tight across her chest, her mother's crucifix cold in the hollow of her throat. The building was a converted warehouse. Clean lines, private entrance, the kind of quiet architecture that whispered money, but never shouted it. A black town car was parked at the curb. A driver in a dark suit leaned against it, watching her with professional disinterest. Nadia's phone buzzed, a text from the wrong number. You've been standing across the street for 11 minutes. The focaccia is getting cold. He could see her. She looked up. 3rd floor, far right window. A shadow moved. Nadia crossed the street. She pressed the buzzer. The door opened. Luca Ferraro stood in the doorway. The wrong number was 6'2". The wrong number had shoulders that filled the doorframe like a wall. The wrong number wore a charcoal suit with the sleeves of his white dress shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a single scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. The wrong number had dark hair swept back, a jaw that could cut glass, stubble that looked like it grew back 15 minutes after he shaved, and eyes dark brown, flecked with gold, that locked onto hers with the focused, devastating attention of a man who had been listening to her voice for 4 days and was now, finally, matching it to her face. He was holding a brown paper bag. It smelled like fresh bread and roasted garlic. Nadia, he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. The way a sailor says the name of land after months at sea. Nadia stared at him. She processed. She was a woman who assessed emergencies for a living, and every alarm in her body was firing simultaneously, not from danger, but from the overwhelming, disorienting recognition that the voice she'd been texting, the presence that had sent someone to fix her mother's machine, the stranger who had listened without homework, was not a therapist, not a social worker, not a kind anonymous donor. He was something else entirely. You're not in logistics, Nadia said. I am in logistics, Luca replied. His voice was exactly as she'd imagined. Low, deliberate, a controlled rumble that vibrated in her sternum. I just manage a different kind of supply chain. You're Luca Ferraro. She knew the name. Everyone in New York knew the name. It lived in the space between newspaper headlines and whispered rumors, in the cracks of polite society where the truth about who really ran the city leaked through. Yes, he said. She should have run. She should have turned on her heel, walked to her car, and driven away. She should have called the police. The same police who had done nothing about Derek, who had told her to document everything, while her ex-husband sat outside her apartment watching her lights. She didn't run. Is that bread? She asked, looking at the brown paper bag. Luca looked down at the bag in his massive hands, then back at her face. The tiniest fracture appeared in his expression, not a smile, but the ghost of one, a crack in the granite. Focaccia, he said. I was told you haven't eaten anything substantial in 3 days. Who told you that? You did, Thursday night, between complaining about Gerald, your check engine light, and describing the particular shade of grey the dispatch center ceiling turns at 3 a.m. Nadia blinked. He had listened. Not just heard. Listened. The way she listened to callers on the dispatch line. The way you listen when every detail matters. She looked at the focaccia. She looked at the mafia boss. I don't eat bread from criminals, she said. It's sourdough, Luca said flatly. From Giulietta's. If you can resist Giulietta's sourdough focaccia, you're either dead or lying. Nadia almost laughed. It rose in her chest. Warm. Involuntary. Startling. The first real laugh she'd felt in months. She took the bread. Over the next 2 weeks, Luca Ferraro learned more about Nadia Vasquez than any intelligence file could contain. He learned that she drank her coffee with too much sugar and not enough milk. He learned that she talked to her mother's crucifix when she was anxious, pressing it against her lips, whispering prayers that were half Spanish and half negotiation. He learned that she could assess a caller's medical emergency in under 8 seconds based on the pitch, speed, and tremor of their voice. He learned that her hands shook after every shift, fine tremors she hid by clasping them together, and that she considered this a personal failing rather than the physiological aftershock of absorbing other people's trauma for 12 hours straight. He learned that she was the most competent person he had ever encountered, and he learned that competence, in the absence of anyone who notices, becomes its own kind of prison. He came to the dispatch center once. Just once. Elena drove him. He stood in the observation corridor, a glass-walled hallway used by supervisors and city officials, and watched Nadia work. She was handling a cardiac arrest call. A man was dying in a bathroom in Queens, and his 12-year-old daughter was on the line, screaming. Nadia's voice cut through the static. Calm, warm, absolute. I need you to listen to me, sweetheart. Can you hear me? Good. Put your hand flat on your daddy's chest. Feel that. That's where we push. I'm going to count with you. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Luca watched her hands on the keyboard, her jaw set with fierce concentration, her crimson cardigan bright against the blue screens, the crucifix swinging with each breath. She was saving a man's life with her voice. Just her voice. No weapons. No money. No power, except the power of a woman who refused to let a 12-year-old girl lose her father on a Tuesday night. Elena, standing beside Luca, adjusted her reading glasses and said nothing. Luca said nothing either. He watched until the paramedics arrived on the call and Nadia's shoulders dropped exactly 1 inch, the only release she allowed herself before she picked up the next call. She carries the world, Elena observed quietly. The world should carry her, Luca replied. His voice was rough. He turned and walked out of the corridor without looking back. Luca Ferraro just watched Nadia save a life with her voice and realized She is the strongest person he's ever seen. But there's a man in khakis who thinks he still owns her, and he has no idea what's about to happen. If you can feel this story building, like that like button and tell me, should Luca handle Derek or should Nadia? Drop your answer below. The danger didn't come from the underworld. It came from suburbia. Derek Calloway showed up at Nadia's apartment on a Friday evening at 7:14 p.m. She was still in her scrubs and crimson cardigan, making her mother's dinner. Arroz con pollo, her grandmother's recipe. The scent of cilantro and garlic filling the small kitchen. The knock was polite. That was the worst part. It was always polite. 3 measured raps. The knock of a man who had practiced sounding reasonable. Nadia looked through the peephole. Her blood turned to concrete in her veins. Sandy brown hair, blue eyes, khakis. A button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly. He was holding a bouquet of grocery store daisies. "Nadie," he called through the door. "I just want to talk." Nadia pressed her back against the wall, her mother's crucifix dug into her collarbone. In the kitchen, Rosa was quiet, her thin hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. "Go away, Derek. I just want 5 minutes. I miss you. The language of control always wears the skin of love. I miss you never meant I miss you. It meant I miss having you where I could see you. I have a restraining order," Nadia said, her voice steady. The dispatch voice. The voice that held strangers back from the edge. "It's a piece of paper, Nadie." His tone shifted. The politeness flickered like a light bulb about to die. "I just want to see you." She didn't respond. She picked up her phone. She didn't call the police. She texted the wrong number. "He's here." The reply came in 3 seconds. "Address. I gave you my address when you sent someone for the concentrator. I remember. Don't open the door. Elena is closer. 7 minutes. 7 minutes." Nadia held the phone against her chest. She could hear Derek's breathing through the thin door. Patient, proprietary, a man waiting for what he believed was already his. Elena Vitali arrived in 5. She didn't come alone. Luca's town car pulled up 6 seconds later. What happened next was not violent. It was worse than violence. It was the total, absolute dismantling of a man's illusion of power by someone who possessed the real thing. Luca Ferraro stepped out of the car, walked into the building, and climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. He rounded the corner to find Derek Calloway leaning against Nadia's door, daisies in hand, the picture of harmless suburban masculinity. Derek looked up, and then Derek looked up. Luca filled the hallway the way a thunderstorm fills a valley, 6'2", shoulders that blocked the fluorescent light, arms that strained the fabric of his charcoal suit jacket, dark eyes that contained absolutely nothing. No anger, no threat. Nothing except the vast, empty patience of a man who had all the time in the world, and no compunction about how he used it. He didn't touch Derek. He didn't threaten Derek. He simply stood there, 4 feet away, and waited. Derek's blue eyes went wide. The daisies trembled in his hand. "Who are you?" Derek managed. Luca looked at the daisies. He looked at the door. He looked at Derek. "I'm the wrong number," Luca said. His voice was low, flat, devoid of emotion, which was infinitely more terrifying than anger. "And you are standing at a door that doesn't belong to you anymore." Behind the door, Nadia listened. She heard the silence that followed. The kind of silence that only exists when one person in a conversation has realized with absolute cellular certainty that they are outmatched. "Leave," Luca said, not loudly, quietly. "The way you say things that are not requests." Derek left. He dropped the daisies. He walked past Luca without touching the walls, his body drawn in, his shoulders rounded, his blue eyes fixed on the floor. He did not come back. Not that night, not the next week, not ever. The restraining order that the police had called just a piece of paper had suddenly grown teeth. Nadia opened the door. Luca stood in the hallway, his massive frame filling her doorway, his dark eyes. Those gold-flecked, exhausted, devastating eyes, looking at her with an expression she had never seen on another human face. It wasn't pity. It wasn't desire. It wasn't even protectiveness. It was recognition. The look of someone who has been listening to a voice in the dark and is now, for the first time, seeing the person behind it. "Are you okay?" he asked. It was the simplest question. It was the only question, and it broke her. Nadia's composure crumbled, not like a wall falling, like ice melting, slowly, inevitably, one layer at a time. Her shoulders dropped. Her chin trembled. Her dark brown eyes filled with the tears she'd been holding since she was 24 years old and married a man who told her that crying was manipulation. She didn't cry gracefully. She cried the way real people cry. Messy, ugly, gasping, her hands shaking, her nose running. The kind of crying that happens when you've been strong for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be allowed to stop. Luca didn't touch her. He stood in the doorway and he let her cry. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't hand her a tissue. He waited. When the storm passed, when Nadia's breathing steadied and her hands stopped shaking, and she wiped her face with the sleeve of her crimson cardigan, she looked up at him. "I ruined your evening," she whispered. "My evening involved a shipping dispute with a man from Rotterdam," Luca said. "You improved it considerably." She laughed. It was a wet, broken, beautiful laugh. The kind that only comes after real crying, when the body is so exhausted from feeling that it can only respond with joy. He stayed. He sat in her tiny kitchen, at her tiny table, in a chair that creaked dangerously under his weight, and he ate leftover arroz con pollo with a fork that looked like a toy in his enormous hand. The kitchen was small, 8 by 10 feet, barely enough room for the table, the ancient stove, the refrigerator covered in family photos held up by magnets from places Rosa had never visited. It smelled of cilantro and garlic, and the particular warmth of a home that is loved fiercely and maintained on a budget that doesn't allow for love. Rosa sat across from him in her wheelchair, studying this massive, dangerous man with the same sharp, knowing eyes her daughter had inherited. She ate slowly, her thin hands trembling around the fork, but her gaze was absolutely steady. "You're the wrong number," Rosa said, spooning rice into her mouth with the slow precision of a woman whose hands no longer obeyed her. "Yes, ma'am. You fixed my machine. It needed a new compressor. You scared away the man in the khakis." He scared easily. Rosa set down her fork. She looked at Luca with the penetrating, unflinching directness of a woman who had survived immigration, widowhood, disease, and the slow theft of her own body, and had decided long ago that politeness was a luxury she could no longer afford. "My daughter has been carrying this family since she was 21 years old," Rosa said. "She dropped out of college. She works until her hands shake. She hasn't bought herself new shoes in 2 years. She puts cream in my coffee and drinks hers black because cream costs extra." Nadia's face burned. "Mama, I'm not finished, Mija." Rosa didn't look away from Luca. Every man who has come into her life has taken something from her. Her time, her peace, her confidence. Her ex-husband took her belief that she deserved to be treated gently. Rosa's voice cracked, but her eyes stayed dry. "So, I need to know. Wrong number. Are you here to take something? Or are you here to give something back?" The kitchen was silent. The refrigerator hummed. The oxygen concentrator breathed its quiet rhythm in the next room. Luca set down his fork. He met Rosa's gaze. "Mother to man, the oldest negotiation in the world. I'm here because your daughter's voice was the most honest thing I'd heard in 7 years, Luca said. "And because she deserves someone who listens without keeping score." Rosa studied him for a long, unblinking moment. Then she nodded once. "You're staying for coffee," Rosa said. It was not a question. Luca nodded. "I would like that." Nadia made coffee. It was the only thing she could think to do, the ritual of grinding the beans, boiling the water, pressing the French press with her palms. The scent of dark roast filling the small kitchen and temporarily replacing the smell of fear. She set a mug in front of him. Their fingers brushed. It wasn't like the movies. There was no electric jolt, no symphony, no dramatic zoom. It was smaller than that, quieter. It was the feeling of a frequency locking in. 2 radios that had been scanning static, suddenly finding each other. Nadia sat down across from him. The kitchen was small. Their knees almost touched under the table. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you answer? That first night, the voice note. Why didn't you just delete it?" Luca looked at his coffee. He looked at the family photos on the fridge. Nadia as a child, gap-toothed, laughing. Rosa in a workshop, hands buried in white silk. A man who must have been Nadia's father, dark-eyed, arm around Rosa, grinning. "Because you were honest," Luca said. He said it slowly, the way he said everything, each word measured, chosen, placed with care. In my world, honesty is either an accident or a trap. Yours was neither. It was just pain, unperformed. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard anything real. Nadia pressed her mother's crucifix against her lips. She felt the worn gold, the small rough edges of the cross. You're a dangerous man, Luca. Yes. You've done terrible things. Yes. You're not going to lie about that. I don't lie to you, Nadia. I lie to everyone else. You're the exception. She looked at him across the table. This massive, scarred, exhausted man who had answered a wrong number and chosen to stay, who had listened without homework, who had fixed a concentrator and bought focaccia and stood in a hallway and made a man in khakis vanish from her life. I don't know what this is, she whispered. Luca reached across the table, slowly, the way he did everything, deliberately, with absolute control, as though every movement was a decision that could not be undone. His massive, scarred hand covered hers, the crucifix chain tangled between their fingers, the gold cross pressed between their palms. I don't know either, he said, but I know that I heard your voice in the dark, and I haven't been the same since. The most dangerous call you will ever make is the one where you tell the truth about yourself. Not because the truth is shameful, not because vulnerability is weakness, but because the truth, once spoken aloud, cannot be unspoken. It hangs in the air like smoke, and it finds the ears it was always meant to reach. Nadia Vasquez spent her life saving strangers with her voice. She talked down the desperate, guided the panicked, held the dying in the warm cradle of her words. But she never used that voice for herself. She carried 3 jobs and a dying mother and a binder full of restraining orders, and she did it in silence. Because she had been taught that asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. And then she sent a voice note to the wrong number. And the wrong number listened. Sometimes the wrong number is the only person in the world who has time. Sometimes the man who runs the city's shadows is the only one who can see the woman standing in the light. Sometimes the most dangerous person you'll ever call turns out to be the safest place you've ever landed. If someone in your life is drowning, if they're working 3 jobs and smiling through it, if they're carrying a world that would crush most people, if they're calling out into the dark and hoping someone hears, be the wrong number. Pick up. Listen. Don't give advice. Don't assign homework. Just say the 4 most powerful words a human being can hear. I have time now. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell us in the comments. We love seeing where our listeners are around the world. Share this story with the person in your life who carries too much. The friend who never asks for help. The mother who never sits down. Send it to them and tell them, I heard you. I have time. God bless you. And thank you for listening.